Welcome to Making Money. This is Matt McCall. It's the 28th of September. It's a Thursday. And of course, it's 2023. We got a great interview coming up for you. I can tell you, folks, I am quite the critic when I go to presentations and conferences because I feel like a lot of time people just do not present information very well. About a month ago, I saw this gentleman speak, and he's probably one of the greatest presenters that I've seen in the last decade plus. We're bringing on today Dr. Scott Tinker. He is the director of the Bureau of Economic Geology at the University of Texas of Austin. He's also the host of a PBS show called Energy Switch. We're going to dive into everything from oil and gas to nuclear to SMRs, kind of the new thing going on in nuclear energy. We're going to talk about his travels around the world and how energy is really one of the most important drivers of the economy, which in turn drives the stock market. All that and more coming up right now on Making Money. Do you own one of America's 7 most dangerous stocks? These 7 stocks have been on a tear this year, driving about 75% of all the gains the S&P 500 has seen in the first half of 2023, and leaving the other 493 in the dust. But here's what most folks don't know. Owning even one of these stocks could be a dangerous mistake. That's because what's around the corner for the stock market could catch you off guard. It's a distinct pattern that happens roughly every 10 to 12 years. And each time, it opens a rare window in the stock market where investors stand to create or lose huge amounts of wealth. Right now, it's on the verge of happening again. We put everything you need to know, including the names of these 7 stocks, in a new report we'd like to send you today for free. Get the facts yourself. Go to 7stocksreport.com to get your free copy. You can get the full list of the 7 most dangerous stocks and prepare for what's coming. Again, that's 7stocksreport.com for a free copy of our new report. All right, folks. So here he is, Mr. Scott Tinker. Scott, thanks so much for joining us. I got to tell you, and I told you the story before we jumped on air here. I'm a very, very tough critic of speakers. I do a lot of speaking like you, and you always want to give respect to other people and stay and watch them. And sometimes I'm falling asleep. It's middle of the morning. I saw you speak for the first time a few weeks ago, Scott. It was late in the day. It was after a happy hour. It was after eating some dinner. It was dark in there and we're drinking wine. And you're talking about geothermal and hydrocarbons and oil and gas and so everything. And you had me so awake, I couldn't even sleep that night. You are probably one of the greatest speakers. I've told all my colleagues, one of the greatest, honest to God, one of the great speakers I've ever seen. And so thank you so much for coming on the show for the first time. And I just can't wait. Let's just dive into it. You had that great presentation, which we saw, and it is available online. If you do it, you've had a great TED Talk as well. Give us a little bit about what got you into this and really the overview of that presentation.
Yeah. Probably after that intro, it'd be best not to open my mouth. It's going to only go downhill from here. Oh, yeah. I've been in energy my whole life, actually. My dad was in the energy business, so I was kind of born into it. And long career, some in industry and some in academia, some working with governments. And that has led me down this strange path of trying to understand how all these things play together. It's been fun and interesting and complicated and confusing and humbling and all those together. But I think the biggest impact has been making films where we go around the world and actually get deep into these countries, and both some with energy and some without energy, and try to understand that global dynamic from severe energy economic poverty all the way up to severe wealth. And that's what I do is work on that problem, again, with governments and industry and academics and NGOs and the general public, and try just to distill the complexities, but not to oversimplify it.
Yeah, you said something in a presentation, and correct me if I miss a word here, but basically you said everything in our lives depends on energy. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. In the TED Talk, I make it a Dr. Seuss moment. Our pets and our jets, our homes and our phones, our heaters and our beaters. What we don't understand really is that Matt, is that it's not just gasoline and electricity out of a plug. There's literally nothing in the modern world that doesn't involve substantial amounts of energy, whether it's to extract it from the earth, make it, move it to where it needs to be, use it, and dump it later. The whole supply chain takes energy. And that's the reality. And I don't think most of us understand that. No reason we would, unless you don't have these things. And then you quickly understand it. So that's what I mean by that. Everything in our lives depends on energy. Otherwise, we're hungry and naked in the dirt. And there are 1 billion people in the world today. Sadly, they're still pretty hungry and without much clothing in the dirt. And in this world, this modern world today, which is unacceptable. It's just not right. And it's solvable. So that's the whole spectrum, and it's a critical one to address.
And you talked about, showed some pictures. I know you've done films, obviously, in some third world countries. I think Africa was one that I remember. There's some countries in Africa that you were in. Tell me a little bit about this international push, especially developed countries, to move, whether it's 2035 or 2050, carbon neutral, go to all renewable. You have all the hippies at these liberal colleges pushing for, solar right now, EVs right now, no more oil and gas. Is that a reality? Because you look at these third world countries, and how do you tell them not to use oil and gas?
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. On Tuesday afternoon, I gave a big talk in Calgary to over 100 CEOs in industry and senior government people, the energy minister from Alberta, etc. The next day, I spoke that evening at Wesleyan University in Connecticut, a small private liberal arts college, been around a long time, to students and faculty. So this was 180 degrees, right? And pretty much the same talk. Not the one you heard, but along those lines. And I appreciate that because I can begin to understand where different people are coming from. And the point of trying to work in that space is to get all of us to understand that overlap between the energy and the economy and the environment, how they all play together. I call it the radical middle, that overlap space. And, it's been pretty small through the years, getting bigger. I have hope, and we see a lot more engagement there. But those things all have to work together. You can't be too far off on the energy only side or the economy only or the environment emissions only side of things, or everything else fails. So that's the great challenge. And a lot of things playing out around that. We got governments in the Western world trying to mandate certain things that they believe are going to be address these issues. The challenge, of course, is no government's really smart enough. Never has been, never will be, because markets are smart. Markets basically are what allow us to scale things and make them affordable. In order to do that, governments can kind of guide. Has to be both. Can't be one or the other, but it can't be only government solutions. So mandating electric vehicles, mandating the closure of coal mines, mandating no oil leasing, etc., is really, on the other hand, mandating biofuels, corn ethanol, or mandating solar panels. It doesn't work. And you saw this just this week in the UK. Prime Minister has backed off of that, at least forestalled the forced timing of some of these things because the economy is imploding. The poorest among them can't afford the cost of the electricity, and the fuels are going into their businesses. They can't keep things going. And he finally gets it. He has always gotten it. He's finally going to act on that for a little while, take the heat. And that's true in most of the modern Western world, this conflict between the climate and what could be done for that, and then secure energy. And we'll go deeper if you want to, but I'll just say this, and it's very clear. I'll use Germany as an example. When Mr. Putin weaponized natural gas and cut off gas to Europe through the Nord Stream pipeline, and Germany was the biggest and first kind of recipient of that, what did Germany do? And Germany is a very clean-thinking economy, for sure. Their people are passionate about that. They had 3 nuclear reactors still open at the time. They had shut down the rest of the fleet post Fukushima Daiichi. He still had 3 open. Their plan was to shut them down in the spring of this year, of 23, and they did. And they increased their coal burning power plants again. In fact, taking down a wind farm to dig a coal mine now in Germany. So here you have this great irony of shutting down existing efficient electrical generation from nuclear plants with no emissions and opening up coal power in order to make it secure. The point being that every leader on the planet is going to choose energy security over climate security when push comes to shove. It's going to happen every single time. You can do both, try both, but if push comes to shove, you choose energy security for the economy. And that's what I'm not sure folks fully understand.
Let me follow up on that. That's a great point. The way you present that energy security over the climate, and obviously the most governments are trying to tiptoe that fine line, but I have no faith in most governments. So I think they're going to fall off. So if you think about renewable energy, battery storage, the minerals and materials you need for a lot of the advances in renewable and battery storage, we don't have in the Western world, especially not in America. You look at rare earths, the majority of the refining takes place in China. A lot of the deposits are in China and other areas of the world that aren't too friendly with a lot of the Western world. How is that possible to even move forward?
Yeah, I'm pretty stickler for terms, right?
Okay.
Words matter, especially in energy. So I said in a TED talk, after a little while, you only get 17 minutes for the whole thing, so you have to kind of get through it. But I said to 1,100 students live, you're not going to like me, but there's no renewable energy. And I had built into that because by explaining that everything that you just described, whether it's a solar panel or a wind turbine or a battery, that stuff comes from the earth. We mine it, and then we manufacture it into energy collecting systems. And then they wear out, and we dump them back into the earth, and we do it again. So anytime you mine, make, dump over and over, it's not renewable. And as a geologist, mining does not bother me, but it's not green, okay, or whatever green means. It has environmental impacts. So you said rightfully, although I don't think completely in the sense that, in fact, in the U.S., we do have a lot of these resources, resource being something that's there in the earth.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Yeah.
A resource of oil, a resource of gas, a resource of copper, a resource of lithium, etc. But they're not reserves. We haven't in a long time explored for these things to make them economic reserves. That is happening in the rest of the world. China has been quite brilliant, in my opinion, about their strategy through Belt and Roads and other early initiatives to invest in the acquisition of the processing of those metals. They don't have all of them. So they've gone around the world to where they're extracted, and they now own the processing of almost 80% of the critical metals and minerals that are used in elements for solar, wind, and batteries. It's brilliant. And therefore, now they're competing head on for electric vehicles with Europe, selling solar panels and wind turbines, using them in their own country, et cetera. Again, it's a very long view of things, partly driven by the fact, and this is really important, that China doesn't have much in the way of oil and gas. The reserves of both are very low. They've tried to explore for that. So they need optionality. They don't have these things. They got to have options to natural gas. They're building nuclear, big time hydro, bringing in LNG, but they also see the solar and wind as a piece of their electric future. We can talk about the reality of the scale, which is vital to truly understand. And also options to oil. So the electric car is important to China, not only for their own internal use, but as one of their big products that they will share and export and sell to the world. So this reality of resource is important for global leaders. You can basically say, well, let's just shift our transportation system from liquids, dependent somewhat on OPEC, to metals, batteries, dependent heavily on China. And that may make you feel better or worse, but you damn well better know you're doing it. Where is your
Yeah.
security pain point in doing that? Because that's what we're talking about doing if we force the deployment of electric vehicles at scale. And by the way, EVs have a role to play. I like EVs for some things,
Mhm.
fine, but not everything. We can't mandate them for everything.
Yeah, you talk about the government, and just a couple of weeks ago, the BRICS Plus, I guess they're called now, invited in three very important countries in the Middle East, giving that group's oil production, I can't remember number, 40 to 44% of the world's oil production. China knew what they were doing when they invited them in to join that group, obviously, and it's amazing because now they have that exposure to the oil and gas, which they, like I said, they don't have that in their own specific region. So they're playing the long game, and I think they're doing it right. Not to say I'm pro China or anything, not saying anything, but I think they're doing it right. What's your overall view on nuclear energy? Just my quick view. I've been following uranium prices for almost 2 decades, and we kind of had this lost decade plus until recently. I mean, just a week and a half ago or so, it hit about a 10, 12-year high. Price of uranium per pound broke out. And it's kind of, I feel like the Ukraine war kind of brought a lot of things to light with the natural gas coming out of Russia. You mentioned Germany. I think they made a huge mistake to continue to shut those down. But France, held back some of theirs. They were trying to get off. They held it back. U.S. opened the first new reactors in 40 years down in Georgia earlier this year. I'm a huge proponent of nuclear energy. I'd love to get your view on that. And if it is truly a need to meet any of these goals that these governments have of zero carbon.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack. You kind of go backwards. We did open our first plant Vogel in quite a while. It took a long time. It was way over budget. Southern company, and gave a lot of gray hair to the CEO who I happen to be friends with. And then you start looking at France, yes, but they weren't necessarily holding it back. There was kind of some scheduled reactor refurbishing going on, ironically and coincidentally, in this exact time of the Putin cutoff of natural gas. So they didn't have the capacity to generate and export electrons like they have in the past year. Those things will come around and get going. But France has done it, again, by necessity. They didn't have much oil or gas, so they went nuclear, and good for them. No emissions, very affordable, and a pretty robust fleet. As you start to think broader than that, you look where large reactors, talking a gigawatt, 1,000 megawatt size, the kind we're used to, are being built. They're being built mostly in China, some still in Korea. So in Asia, let's say. Asia is accepting of and building nuclear reactors. And not just a few. We're talking dozens of them, and have more than 100 on the books if they play it all out that way. So this is where nuclear is happening globally today. Enter the small modular reactor. Been around a long time. We've had them on aircraft carriers and submarines for more than half a century, floating around in the oceans. But small, 50, 75, 100 megawatts, so a tenth or less of the size of the big ones. You can put them, they're not much bigger than a little bigger than my office, not much in diameter. You can bury them and put a cap on it and put them where you want to have them. They're very, you can distribute them, if you will, almost like distributed solar and wind, where they need to be. And that's a good thing. I think the concept of that and the reality of that playing out would be very important. There are better technologies now. Still some light water reactors, much like our fleet, but a little bit more advanced. And then some sodium-cooled reactors and others that are coming along. I just think it's a vital thing for us to work towards. Western Europe seems to be a little allergic to it still. Not Eastern Europe, Poland, Romania. Some of these countries are quite open. NuScale. They're the light water. TerraPower is the sodium. That's the kind of Chris Levesque runs that with Bill Gates' company. John Hopkins runs NuScale. These are good friends. People we do a lot with. We're starting to see Nuclear services being invested in again. Just read a piece earlier this week. The UK is at a 20-year high in its nuclear, basically, services or human resource capacity. They're at a 20-year high in the number of people involved in it. So it's coming. And I think we better get on that train in the West and make sure we're not left behind as it pulls away from the station. We want to be on that train. And many climate folks that are committed to climate as a primary goal are supporters. Last piece on that, really cool to me, at Wesleyan University, I polled the students and I said, how many of you are scared of nuclear? Not one hand went up. And this is very consistent. How many of you would see nuclear as part of the solution for climate change? Every single hand went up. So young people are not scared of nuclear. I was trained because of I'm old. I got under desks in kindergarten. It was the Cold War. It was nuclear weapons. We conflated that with nuclear electricity somehow. They shouldn't be. And so I was trained that way. Young people today have been more indoctrinated into be fearful of existential threats from climate change, but not nuclear. So I think we have a neat opportunity here as this next generation comes along to get back on that high density, low emissions, very affordable once it's built, the electron's very cheap, nuclear train as part of our future solution.
I love that. That really surprises me. I'm so happy to hear the younger generation, but
very consistent.
Does surprise me.
Very consistent, Matt. In fact, on our PBS show, The Energy Switch, where I have two guests, they don't always agree on everything. They're real high level, and we get into good discussions, not binary, goofy, good and bad, clean and dirty stuff. Like, for real, let's talk about. Yeah. We had two young students on in season 3. One was a former petroleum engineer who's now doing carbon capture and storage in graduate school. The other one is a senior in nuclear engineering at the University of Wisconsin. And they're both of them are very pro. We had them looking at the future of energy. They're very pro nuclear. In fact, the nuclear engineering student is also Miss America this year. We had brought her onto the show or gotten the commitment earlier, but she was selected Miss America last December, and she's touring the country now in parts of the world as an advocate for nuclear energy. So it's scary, but it's not. It's one of the safest, if not the safest, ways to generate electricity that we know of today. And again, a lot less mining. Look, the density of uranium and thorium is incredible in terms of its energy bang for the buck. You stuff these fuel wads with uranium pellets. They look about maybe a centimeter tall, a half centimeter across, little pellets into the rods. The energy in one of those pellets could drive a car from New York to San Francisco and back to Dallas. One pellet. Wow. Okay, that's how much energy is contained. I can't put the pellet in my car. I don't want your listener to be confused. Give me that pellet. I want to drive that car. No, you need a little nuclear reactor. But that's the reason submarines can go below the surface for months at a time and not refuel. They're not that big. I've been on them. So this is what energy density means, as opposed to biofuels, where you're growing plants, some of the lowest density forms of energy. The wind is very low density. Geothermal is pretty low density. Solar is a little denser on an aerial basis, but not that much. Just takes a lot of area to capture the wind and the sun and convert it into useful electricity. Okay. And by area, I mean area of the earth plus stuff on that area to do that. And that stuff is what we talked about earlier, coming from the earth. It's not judgment. Exactly. Okay. It's physics. Yeah. It's physics.
Yeah. Well, that's what I liked about your presentation. You didn't come at it from a political or judgment. You just basically fed us the facts. And from there, I think, we're all smart human beings and we have to make a decision what we believe in from there. But you fed us a lot of facts. Before I let you go, I know you're a busy man, Scott. I know you recently, we talked a lot about renewable nuclear. We talked a little bit about fossil fuels, but you recently joined the board of Prairie Operating Company. I think they're their areas out in northern Colorado, if I'm not mistaken, out there. Tell us a little bit about what made you join the company.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the board of advisors. They have a
Okay.
board of directors, who are financially responsible. They have a very small advisory board of experts, and that excited me. I think the country needs oil and gas still. We still have to move our vehicles around, and that's done with dense liquids for the most part. We certainly need natural gas. Natural gas is in everything from not just making power, but we use it to make ammonia for fertilizers. We use it to make plastics. You can put it directly in cars as compressed natural gas. We cook with it, LPG.
Yeah.
So very versatile fuel, and mostly hydrogen. Methane is CH4, four hydrogens for every carbon. So propane, butane, pentane, various amounts of hydrogen with a little carbon. So I'm excited to have companies that are still looking for and producing oil and gas. Our country needs it. The world needs it. And if I can be helpful in that regard, I'm not picking it as a winner over everything else. I've joined some nuclear things. I've looked at water cleanup, talking to some people in pipelines, et cetera. Just folks who are investing in energy systems that are affordable and reliable. I'm very passionate about, because one of my big passions, as we talked about earlier, is really this energy poverty. We made a film about global energy poverty, and it's brutal in the world. The billions of people that don't have any or not reliable energy, 4 to 5 billion people, as compared to 1 to 2 billion of us in a rich world and another billion or two in between. So this is essential to lifting the world up from poverty. We have to have energy, and I'll play my little part in making sure we do that.
No, I was going to say, I want to thank you for all you do to expose this, and so the masses can see this, because I think there's too many people that are one track mind, go renewable, and not realizing, like you said, over 1 billion people would love to be able to turn their lights on at night, and turn on some heat. And we, unfortunately, a lot of us take that for granted. So
and
thank you so much for opening.
Another 4 billion would love to have it, turn them on, and have them stay on. Right.
Yeah.
And that's that wedge of people with the unreliable energy is really the engine of our world in many ways. And so that's where all industry is important. What everyone in the energy business does is extremely important.
Well, listen, I said it earlier, and I think you're one of the greatest presenters I've ever seen. So nice to have you on. You make me feel smarter. I think there's a lot of people in this world that aren't too bright, and I got to tell you, I took notes that night, and I went home to my team, and I sounded so much smarter in front of them. Like, did you know this? Dr. Scott Tinker told me this. But again, thanks so much for coming. Yeah, thanks a lot for coming on, and hopefully we'll get you back on in the future again to get an update of what's going on, anything new you have going on as well. But our pleasure, and thanks a lot.
Keep up the great work. Yeah.
Opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the contributor and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Stansberry Research, its parent company, or affiliates.